Hey, what's happening, everybody? It's me, Crazyfrankie, and I'd like to welcome you to my Week 14 4 key game picks. Before we talk about those picks, here is the current playoff standing in the AFC and NFC going into this week. In the AFC, the Pittsburgh Steelers are still the 1 seed, the Patriots are the 2nd seed, the Jacksonville Jaguars are the 3rd seed, the Chiefs remain the 4th seed, the Titans are the 5th seed, and the Ravens are the 6th seed. In the NFC, the Vikings now hold the number 1 seed for the moment. Eagles are the 2 seed. Rams are the 3rd seed. The Saints are the 4th seed. The Seahawks are back into a playoff position for the time being. They're the 5th seed. And the Panthers are the 6th seed. Now, quick thoughts from last week. And I have to start with the Chiefs again. This has really become something. A team that really was in position to look like they were going to run away with the AFC West division, let alone maybe even get the number 1 seed. They have just completely fallen apart. This is starting to seem like deja vu all over again. Either it was, I think, the 2008 or 2009 Broncos. They started out that way, and then all of a sudden, they give up the division. And in those two spans, 2 years that the Broncos gave up the division, they're starting to seem like the Chiefs are doing the same exact thing the Broncos did between '08 and '09. Peters obviously is a big deal. He is suspended for the Raiders game because he threw a flag. Obviously, it was out of frustration because the Chiefs lost to the Jets. And really, it's putting a lot of pressure. And the Chiefs now are dealing with enough pressure as it is, besides injuries, and now Peters being suspended. It's really not going to help their cause when you got a divisional foe and a big time foe coming this weekend in Kansas City with them playing the Raiders. So really, the Chiefs have really fallen apart, and it's going to start to sound like deja vu. And by looks of it right now, look, if the Raiders or Chargers somehow were to take over first place, it won't be because they took over first place by themselves. It's because Kansas City screwed up. Obviously, Andy Reid has lost total control of that team. And I don't think this is even fixable or even repairable going into the final weeks of the season. Last week's game a lot of it dealing with the NFC South here. It has really, really become something here. I'm pretty sure prior to the season beginning, a lot of us thought that, well, Atlanta looked like they had the same team, or a lot of us figured it could be a Super Bowl hangover. And they haven't gotten over the loss to the Patriots after choking a lead. It seems to me it's really become very, very obvious for this Falcons team for everything that I've mentioned right now. But the Falcons really had a chance last week against the Vikings, but they just couldn't beat them. And the Saints made their statement, really dominating Carolina last week. And really right now, for the time being, the Saints control their own destiny right now in the NFC South. As far as everything else, the Eagles last week really kind of, I really shouldn't have been too surprised by it because, the Seahawks really, they really have a good home field advantage in Seattle. And despite the fact Seattle's desperate right now, they're trying to cling on to a playoff berth, and they got a huge matchup next week against the Rams, and that will determine the NFC West right there. So obviously the Seahawks they're doing what they can to stay alive. But with the Eagles' loss, now puts the Vikings at the number 1 seed for the time being. And you can't count on other teams right now in the NFC right now, like the Lions and the Packers and the Cowboys. The Cowboys really making a big-time statement, beating the Redskins last week, and they really are proving themselves that they're not finished yet. Same thing with the Packers. They're not finished yet either. And if I have to look for the teams in the AFC, like the Chargers and the Bills and the Raiders, they're still in it. They're still in it right now. All of them have 6-6 records. So these last few weeks, I think we're looking at a great finish for the final 3 weeks of the regular season. Anyways, enough jibber jabber. Let's now get into my picks. And let us begin with key game number 1. It is the Saints and the Falcons. It is a battle for the NFC South. Now for this game here, look, the Saints are a 1.5 point favorite, and the Falcons really struggled last week against the Vikings. The Falcons are doing what they can to try to catch the Saints for the division. Now, keep in mind, they're not that far behind. And this game is vitally important for the Saints to maintain control of first place. And for the Falcons is to really have a shot at the division. Drew Brees last week went 25 of 34, 269 yards, and 1 touchdown in a win over the Panthers last week. Now, Ryan really last week did not play a good game. He was 16 of 29 and 173 yards, no touchdowns. Luckily, he was not intercepted in that game. Saints overall, the way they're playing right now in terms of their offense, they have an advantage on offense. Defense-wise, they pretty much have an advantage too. The Falcons, even though they had a big win against the Cowboys a couple of weeks ago, but yet they struggled with the Vikings. And if it comes down with their offense, if they couldn't stop the Vikings on the offense and all, what's going to become of the Saints here? The Saints, even though they're slight favorite in this one, I agree with that. I think, to me, the Saints offense, this is another statement game for the Saints to take total control of the division now. They've already beaten they've already swept the Panthers, and this game now with the Falcons is vitally important to them to maintain that position. So who wins this game here? I'm going to go with the Saints here. Their offense I think is just going to be too much for the Falcons defense to handle. The Falcons going to have to the defense is going to have to really come up with big plays and stopping that offense the Saints have. And especially the Falcons, their own offense here, they got to figure out a way to bust through that defense that the Saints have that's really come alive. So, but I just think it's going to be too much for the Falcons to handle. I like the Saints in this game here, and I'm going to stick with it. Saints over the Falcons. Key game number 2. Obviously, this is a very big one as I go to the AFC West. This could not be a bigger game now here. The Raiders and the Chiefs. The Chiefs now, this is it for them. They are a 4-point favorite in this one, but that number should be lower. This team is really, Andy Reid has lost total control of this team, as I mentioned before in the beginning of this video. With Peters out with a 1-game suspension, he's not going to be playing in this game. It just only helps the Raiders even more. Now, key stats from their respective games. Carr went 22 of 36, 287 yards, 1 touchdown pass. But they barely beat the Giants last week. Keep in mind, the Raiders' defense is still an issue. Now, they were lucky they're playing under 500 par teams. This is a game now for the Raiders where, look, they've already beaten them earlier in the season. But this should be the statement game for the Raiders. And it could not have come in a better position for them with Andy Reid losing total control of the Chiefs right now. Now, Alex Smith, he actually had a good game last week against the Jets, but yet they still ended up losing. You could blame, really, the fault was on the defense. Alex Smith, 19 of 33, 366 yards, 4 touchdown passes, and no interceptions. After all that, and yet your defense lets you down, that to me tells you right now, you guys, this team is in trouble here. And I don't think you can repair the damage that the Chiefs have already had of experience. Raiders' offense is now looking slightly better than the Chiefs. Even though the Raiders' defense is average, but if they make a statement on if their offense really comes alive more in this game, I like the Raiders in this game. And that is my pick. This might be one of my upset picks here. And I think the Raiders are going to beat the Chiefs. It seems to me Andy Reid has no control of the team. This is really a disaster for the Chiefs if it comes down to it that they blow this division. The Raiders they look like at the whole season, the way they played throughout the last 13 games, they look like they played terribly and could miss the playoffs. But thanks to the Chiefs messing up now, the Raiders could not be in any more of a better position to take over first place. Now keep in mind, you cannot forget about the Chargers. The Raiders lost to the Chargers at the beginning of the year, during the beginning of the season. So now it comes vital now. If the Chiefs can't beat the Raiders here, I think it will come down to the Raiders and Chargers to win that division. But going out of subject here for this game and all, I like the Raiders in this game. But it is not a sure pick here because the Chiefs are going to be playing desperately here, and I think they got to play with desperation if they want to hang on to the division lead. And that is the way. And I don't know, but I still think the Raiders are much better offense coming alive here. Their defense, I know there's still some question marks, but I think I'm going to stick with it. I think the Raiders are going to beat the Chiefs here. Raiders over the Chiefs. Key game number 3, another big one. Vikings and the Panthers. Vikings are a 2.5-point favorite in this one. Now, I know this is I think the second or third week in a row I've talked about the Vikings here. Well, for a couple things. Number one, the number 1 seed is hanging in the balance right now for them because they know the Eagles are 1 game back. They're tied with the Eagles for first place. And a loss here puts the Eagles back at the number 1 seed. And Minnesota, the way I look at it right now, they need home field. Panthers trying to stay alive. They're trying to stay alive not just for their own position in the NFC South to try to catch the Saints. I don't think it's going to happen now because they lost them twice already. But to hold on to their wild card position. Case Keenum last week went 25 of 30, 227 yards, 2 touchdown passes in a win last week against the Falcons. Cam Newton in the loss to the Saints, 17 of 27, 183 yards and 2 touchdown passes. He didn't play all that well last week against the Saints. Vikings are a 2.5-point favorite in this one, and I do agree with that. Panthers offense really, I know this is a home game for them. They need to show up in this game if they want to stay alive in their playoff positioning. Offense-wise for the Vikings, I mean, they only scored 14 points last week, so that's kind of a downturn, a little bit of a down week for them in terms of their offense. And you don't think the Panthers are going to come out hungry in this game, and I think they will. This is not a sure pick here. I think that both offenses. Yeah, I think I give it to the Vikings a little bit more, but Panthers offense is also good. Defense-wise, they're evenly matched here. So I expect this game to go back and forth here. I think this is going to be a good game here. Very close game here. I'm not sure who wins this one here. This is not a sure pick here. But the way the Vikings are continuing in control, not just in the number, not just of their own playing, of their own play of football in these last few weeks, and I still think their offense is just a tad better than the Panthers in this game, but it will be a close game, guarantee it. I'm going to pick the Vikings here. I just think their offense just still a tad better. The Panthers defense really needs to come up big in this game if they're going to stop the Vikings offense here. But I like Minnesota in this one. I think the Vikings win this game here. I think they win by a field goal. This will be a very close game here. Possibly maybe one of the games of the week here. I don't know, but this should be a good one here in Carolina. But I'm going to go with Minnesota here. I think the Vikings beat the Panthers here. Vikings over the Panthers. And finally, key game number 4. Hopefully this is another good one here. The Eagles and the Rams. Before I talk about this game right now, keep in mind of something here. Right now in Southern California, we're dealing with wildfires right now, and it's become really a disaster. What's going on in the city right now, all over the region. I have not heard anything yet from the NFL if this game will be moved, if the wildfires continue to stay out of control up until the weekend. And right now, there's I don't know why the NFL hasn't said anything right now. Because keep in mind, the Rams and the Chargers both play at home this Sunday. And if the air quality continues with the smoke being that bad throughout the entire Southern California region, who knows if these games will be played at the Coliseum and the StubHub Center. So that should be keeping in mind right now for the NFL. They got to really think now going into the weekend here if these games are playable in the region. Because, I mean, I could see some. Where I'm currently living right now, I'm not going to say where exactly I live, and I mean I can see smoke. I'm pretty. I live within. I live within the state, and I could just see the smoke. I mean, it should be a concern right now for the NFL if the Rams and Chargers are going to be able to play here in LA, or either move to San Diego, play the game in San Diego, or another location, or maybe in Northern California. But anyways. Let's say this game is still played, okay? Let's think about that now for a minute. The Rams are a 2.5-point favorite in this one. That number might be much lower. That number will probably go down to 2 points, maybe a game 1.5 point. The Eagles last week in their loss to the Seahawks, they really kind of was a shocker. Carson Wentz didn't, despite the Eagles getting upset last week. I mean, Wentz played pretty good, pretty okay here. I mean, he went 29 of 45, 348 yards, 1 touchdown, but he was intercepted 1 time last week. Now, Jared Goff, I mean, the Rams did control much of the game last week against the Cardinals here, but Goff was pretty average last week. He was 21 of 31, 220 yards in passing, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. So, yeah, this now is going to come to a point. Now, look, there might not be home field advantage for the Rams if this game gets moved out of LA into another location here. Both their offenses are good. There's really no advantage to either team in terms of their offense. Now, defense-wise, the Rams technically do have a better defense. But their defense is going to be put to the test against this Eagle offense. And there's no question the Eagles are going to be desperately hungry to get back their winning ways right now. This is a very tough pick here because of the circumstances of what's going on here in LA. I don't know if they're going to be playing in the Coliseum or not and all. So yeah, the way it looks right now, it's going to be tough to pick who wins this game here. But I'm leaning towards the Eagles. I think the Eagles are going to, I mean, they're positioning right now. They want that #1 seed, and they know they want home field because the way it goes into January and it gets cold up there. And remember, the Eagles play outdoors, unlike Minnesota where they're in a dome. So I like the Eagles in this one in terms of their offense. I think they're going to have a bounce-back game here, and it's going to put a lot of pressure on the Rams next week against the Seahawks for who takes over that NFC West division. And this is why I'll go with the Eagles here. This is not a sure pick. I'm going to say that again. It's not a sure pick. I think the Eagles will have a bounce-back game, but it's not going to be easy. The Rams' defense is good, but their offense is going to really need to be on a groove here to beat this Eagles team. I think this game will go back and forth. This is probably going to be another good one here, depending on where the game might be played. I don't know if it is going to be played in LA or not because of the current situation with the wildfires. So yeah, I'm going to go with the Eagles here. I think the Eagles will have a bounce-back game, and I think they beat the Rams here. Eagles over the Rams. All right, everybody, that wraps up my picks for week number 14. For all of my week 14 picks, go to thesportblog.blogspot.com for all of it. And guys, I will see you all next week when I talk about my picks for week number 15. Keep in mind that video will probably be up much earlier than anticipated. Obviously for personal reasons and something that I will be talking about in another video coming soon. But I'll mention I'll bring it up in my picks. I'll bring it up why I'm making another video before I make my picks here. It's something that's it should be dear to all of us right now, and really it should be. Let's just say it's kind of a political issue right now. But anyways, guys, I'm not going to discuss it here. I want to talk about just football in these videos. And then for now, I'll see you guys next week. Take care.